they've been involved in first team squads, and again, that's another thing that the younger lads look up to. If it's an under 16 in under 21 session, then there'll be under 21s in that session that have been involved in first team. So they're effectively training with someone who's been involved in Premier League football. So for them, it's massive. My philosophy is keeping everything simple as possible from a strength and power point of view, in particular. And I think that's my role really at Sheffield United, is mainly gym based, which is pretty cool. And I love being in and around the gym. I love being hands on, so it's perfect for me. But in terms of my specific gym programming, I think keeping it simple, and looking back and zooming out and looking at the sport itself.
Hello and welcome back to PA Truck Up. Today we have Archie. Hi Archie, how are you doing?
How are you, mate? All good, thank you.
I'm good. So if you just let us know a little bit about yourself, what you do and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so obviously my name's Archie. I'm currently the lead academy physical development coach at Sheffield United. I think my journey started, I would imagine, as most strength and conditioning coaches really. I was a failed sportsman. Cricket was my sport growing up. I loved sports growing up, football as well. But chose to go down the cricket route. Played to a decent level, and then towards the back end of it, when I realised it wasn't really going to be a career, I started gaining an interest into strength and conditioning, probably because I had a lot of injuries myself. And that just sparked an interest. And through getting strength and conditioning as a cricketer, I always used to chat to the strength and conditioning coaches, and I used to think, wow, it's a really cool job. How do I get into it? So I used to chat to them a lot, and then did a master's degree in strength and conditioning at Leeds Beckett. And then alongside that, did 2 internships, one with Rotherham Titans Rugby, and then the other was with Yorkshire Cricket, predominantly with the women's setup there, and then a little bit of the age group stuff as well. Once I graduated, it was straight into a role, really. I got fortunate enough to get into a role in cricket, which was perfect for me. I was still involved in the sport that I loved, but from a different side. And spent a year and a half working at Northampton Cricket. That was my first full-time role. And then progressed on to work for Surrey County Cricket, which I was there for 3 years, and then moved on to a different sport and a different world, back up north where I'm from, at Sheffield United now.
Nice. So what was that transition for you, like going from high-level sports, picking the coach of your strength and conditioning coach, to then developing into these roles that you've had through your career?
Yeah, I think it was really beneficial and lucky that I had that aspect to it as an athlete. Having strength and conditioning as an athlete, it was having those people around was brilliant for me. I could pick their brains. I was really invested in the training, and I've always been invested in fitness and strength and conditioning and looking after my body. So it was, I think you learn a lot on the job in your early career and your early stages. So, nothing will set you up for that. It's a bit like your driving lessons, I think it was definitely lucky that I had that, and very beneficial that I had that as well.
Mm-hmm. So with the sort of first roles of the industry, you're going back to your sport. How did that sort of connect your coaching and what you were doing with the chosen athlete?
Yeah, I think, the fact that the players knew that I had some sort of background as a player in cricket, it can help a little bit in terms of the buy-in. But basically, I just wanted to be a good strength and conditioning coach. I didn't really care whether they knew about my playing experience or anything like that. I just wanted to develop as much as I can as a strength and conditioning coach. And, looking back at some of my programs and things I used to coach, I'm thinking, wow, what was I doing back then? But I think that's probably the same for everyone. I think, like I said, you do a lot of learning on the job, and you're like a sponge early on, and you take so much on in those first few years, which is what I did. I had a great mentor and head strength and conditioning coach I worked from for under Chris Larkin, who sort of worked in Premier League football and then transitioned into cricket. So yeah, he was perfect for me in my first role.
Yeah. With the essentially like going from sport to sport, what's the biggest challenge that you've sort of found, like in a programming sense and like dealing with different types of athletes?
I suppose one of the biggest challenges early on was that I was kind of jealous of the players playing the sport that I wanted to play.
Mhm.
But no, I think like strength and conditioning was the next best thing for me. It was my second passion. So the challenges were, I didn't really face too many challenges. I think I was just really immersed in all of it and just wanted to develop and progress as much as I can, as early as I can, and learn from the people around me. But yeah, there were no real challenges per se.
The programming style that you've got now,
Hmm.
how do you think that sort of impacts the playing opportunities that your athletes are going to have?
Yeah, I think my program has developed a lot over time. I think you kind of do gain some biases as you go through um, your development as a career and through your different roles and the different people that you learn from, and then you sort of develop, your framework, your philosophy that you're working towards, and that has
Mhm.
definitely progressed. And a little bit more, you spend a little bit more time in critical thinking and what might work for this particular athlete, what might work for this particular sport, which I feel like is a skill that's I think takes a little bit of time and a little bit more experience that you need to get. I think when you're young, you see all these cool new sexy exercises and you want to put them in straight away without really having the thought of what that might do,
Yeah.
and why you want to implement those. So I think that's another thing that's progressed.
Yeah. With the sort of philosophy that you have now, can you
Mhm.
take us through how you've gone to this place and some of the different considerations that you put forward within this philosophy?
Yeah, so I think it's changed a fair bit. I think my philosophy is keeping everything simple as possible from a strength and power point of view, in particular. I think that's my role really at Sheffield United is mainly gym based, which is pretty cool. And I love being in and around the gym. I love being hands on, so it's perfect for me. But in terms of my specific gym programming, I think keeping it simple, and looking back and zooming out and looking at the sport itself. And again, going from cricket to football, there was definitely changes in some aspects, but some similarities as well. Mainly similarities rather than differences. I think every athlete's going to squat, every athlete's going to deadlift, every athlete's
Mm.
going to have some sort of accessory work based off injury history, based off sport itself, based off um, the demands of the sport and the injury incidences of the sport. So you have to look at that. But yeah, I think it's keeping everything simple. And another one for me is building an environment where it's engaging and
Mm.
building an environment that creates autonomy for athletes. So getting the athletes to coach themselves, getting the athletes to come in. We've got iPads and Team Builder, so that helps a lot. So they come in, look at what's on Team Builder, they just know, they're straight in, crack on, and they're pretty proficient with GymAware as well. So they can set up GymAware on their own. They look at what speed that they need for that particular day, and then they just crack on, and that's the environment I want to try and chase. And I think one key to having that environment is consistency of work. So chopping and changing exercises, sets, reps every week, it's not really going to create that consistency of work, and you're not going to really see any uh, adaptations or developments with your athletes in terms of their physical qualities. So I think that's
How have you sort of built up this rapport with your athletes and this buy-in that they can essentially come into the gym and work off their session themselves?
yeah. I think one thing that is key is them seeing the improvements for themselves by
Mm.
doing the work. And again, I think that's one big aspect of getting buy-in is seeing those results improve. So looking at counter movement jumps or isometric mid-thigh pull scores going up, creating leaderboards, seeing the same weight moved faster on GymAware, all this creates buy-in. And I think, in my early starts in Sheffield United, there was a preconception that, in football that loading, that, players shy away from it a little bit. But I just wanted to get that across that, you know, strength is the foundation of many physical qualities beneath that. It's, you know, you've got less chance of sustaining soft tissue injuries. And the way that the club plays and the intensity, it's just they just go hand in hand. So yeah, I think those are the keys for buying. I think for me.
You've just sort of touched on an interesting subject, is that there's this misconception in football where if you do weight training, you're going to go slower, you're going to get less
Mm-hmm.
time to move around, all that stuff. How have you managed to effectively demonstrate to your athletes that actually doing these workouts actually make you better on the field?
Yeah, yeah, it's a challenge, and there's still players that I'm yet to crack, and some players provide different challenges to you, but I think it is hard. It is hard to do, but I think again it comes back to the benefits of you have to explain the benefits of why you're doing certain
Mhm.
things, and the level that the game is at in terms of increase high speed running, increase explosive efforts. All of this contributes to improving sort of in those strength elements, and weak things do eventually break. So it's a big part of my philosophy, a big part of the strength and conditioning philosophy at Sheffield United, that we need to be strong. And just because you're playing a certain level doesn't guarantee you that your strength levels are adequate, or
Mhm.
that it's about fine tuning, or that it's about just tapering and making sure you're fresh for the weekend. There's still 17, 18, 19-year-old players playing in the Premier League,
Yeah.
so just because of that doesn't mean that you have to shy away from doing stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's one thing. There's a bit of a misconception in there in football generally. But yeah, it's something that we've tackled pretty well, and it's ingrained in the lads at the minute, and
Mhm.
hopefully they take that through from foundation phase
No,
to youth
yeah.
development to professional development to first team football.
Do you think getting them as early as you have, where they're not like fully in the professional league, but
Hmm.
they're still in a high enough sort of setting that it's easier to then for them to carry through that strength and conditioning element to their performance?
Yeah, massively, and that's the whole point of a performance pathway team, and even from the foundation phase upwards, there's a clear pathway and a clear structure in terms of strength development and movement quality. Because when the under 16 S&C or the 9s to 10s S&C brings up players, they want when they get to under 21 or under 18 level, they need to be strong, adequate movers, and
Mm.
so that when they get to me, they're not playing catch up kind of thing, and they're ready for a little bit more advanced work, and we can push the needle a little bit harder.
Yeah. So in a sense, you've got under 21s where there is a range of ages mixed in there. How do you differentiate that biological playing age and maybe how they actually perform in the field?
Yeah, it's tough because, like you said, in under 21s, you do get a variety of ages, a variety of experiences, a variety of training age within that same age group. And I think it's communicating with the relevant people who have information on players. If it's a player coming out from a different academy, we'll try and get more info on that player to see where they're at in terms of their training age, their testing scores, where they're at, and then if it's internal that they're getting offered a professional deal and they're up with the
Mm.
21s, then we'll talk to the under 18 S&C, we'll talk to the 9s to 16 S&C in terms of their data and how they move, and what's their work on, and their areas to improve, and what's their strengths.
Yeah. With the sort of differences between ages and experiences, how does the day-to-day action look like for you and the athletes?
So from a day-to-day, normal day, training day with the 21s, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the minute we run a ILP program, which is sort of for our high potential players who the club's evaluating, and we'll do extra work for those players based off, testing results, screening results from physios, or if it's come from a coach, you know, from a technical point of view, there might be things that we could improve on from a physical point of view that might help their technical ability. So a combination of those three things will do in the morning. Then they'll go have breakfast, and then we'll have prehab, so pre-training session, which will be themed on based off the theme of the day. So if it's a bigger areas day where we're trying to hit 90-95% of the max V, then we'll do a pre-training session based around that. So it'll be based around Jonas's from Speedworks, projections, switching, reactivity stuff. So we'll have exercises in the gym that incorporate that, some ankle and hamstring isometric work, and then they'll go out and train, and then they'll train, and we'll do an isolated speed session before they start that particular session, working their way up to hit a max V, and then they'll train, come back, and then we'll do a lift. In terms of high day, high central nervous system day, that's what a typical high central nervous system day looks like. They'll come back and they'll do a good solid strength session after that as well.
Within the month, how many of those high V days do you have?
We'll try and tick off once every week, and that's typically on match day +3 or +4. So it's away from the game enough that they're not carrying a little bit of fatigue, and it's not too close to the game where we're bringing fatigue into the next game.
Yeah, we should probably back up a little bit, and we've previously been on a call where you sort of described how you plan these sessions and the intensity of sessions throughout the week. If you just go through that again, because you mentioned that -3 days or +3 days. So if you take us through your thought process behind that and how exactly you plan these sessions.
Yeah, so it's not directly me. There's a team around us that plan these days, and we have a head of performance who looks into the data more, and we have a data scientist as well who will gather all that data and feedback. So it's a team around us that will, and I think it's the done thing sometimes in football in how you periodise the week. So let's just say, for instance, it's a Saturday game. Sunday would be off normally, and Monday match day +2 would be a moderate area day, still carrying a little bit of fatigue in, but the area sizes of the drills and the chances of them getting up to max speed is obviously diminished there. So we keep the area smaller and the intensity of the sessions moderate. And then from a gym point of view, it'll be upper body. And then Tuesday would be the high day, so the high central nervous system day, where they'll do the extensive. So they'll look for a max velocity, a certain amount of high speed running meters, and a certain amount of total distance. Wednesday would be lighter, and then the Tuesday they do the lower body lift in terms of the gym as well. Wednesday would be predominantly gym based, recovery based stuff, and some technical work in the morning with the ILP players. And then Thursday would be another fairly high day, but it would be more intensive in nature. So the smaller areas and more explosive efforts, that's what we're chasing on that day. And we'll chase, rather than chasing high speed running meters, we'll chase explosive efforts. And a certain amount of total distance as well. And then in the warm up, we'd probably extend that a little bit, and we'd focus on more change direction, deceleration work, so that they're prepped, ready for that intensive session. And then Friday would be match day -1, so it'd be technical and tactical based work. And sometimes we do a little primer in the gym as well.
What do you do for your primer sessions?
So at the minute, I'm toying around with some isometric pair in contrast with plyometric work. So it's been early days since I've incorporated that. And players rock up to the games and they tell me off the bat that they feel really good and really sharp and energized, ready for the session. So that's been a bit of a win with our players, and it's something that is going to constantly develop, and I think it does help with our players going into games. But I think you have to pick and choose your moment to where you do it. If the week's been heavy, then they're probably better off just getting in training and getting off. But if you've not had a chance to get much stimulus into them, and the weekly total accumulation of load isn't that big, then by all means crack on with it.
Mm-hmm. If you wouldn't mind, would you be able to go through the sort of exercises and sets reps that you go through for these primer sessions?
Yeah, so I'll try and do a knee-based ISO, which would be a split squat, pull on a trot bar, So go 3 seconds on each leg, 3 reps each leg. That's one set. And then I'd pair that with some split squat jumps, which would be 3 each leg. And then I'd do some sort of ankle iso, so it'd be a run specific, like Natera ankle iso push. Same sets and reps, 3 seconds, 3 reps each leg, and then pair that with some sort of ankle stiffness drill and reactive strength drill, so pogos or a depth drop to box jump or something like that, with low ground contact times. And then the last one would be more of a hip based or posterior chain based one, where I'd do like again a run specific hamstring iso push, and then pair that with some straight leg bounds or scissor bounds, to again trying to replicate the same movement from the isometric that's in the plyometric as well.
Yeah. With in terms of measurable data, how have your athletes sort of improved or progressed from this?
Yeah, so we don't really. So we'll test every 8 weeks, and like I said, this has been fairly new into our program. But one particular player, I think, counter movement jump went up 3 centimeters just from
Oh,
incorporating this kind of work, and we've been doing that type of work with him, not just as a primer, but incorporating some isometric and plyometric contrast work in his working week as well as some extra work. So yeah, I think the combination of that has definitely helped, and that's he's constantly coming to me now and asking to do these type of sessions because he's seen that sort of counter movement jump go up, and you have to sort of rein him back a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely helped, and he got a PB on his counter movement jump, and he was well happy with that.
yeah. How do you sort of reel your athletes back in when they're ecstatic to keep working on and they think that these exercises that's what's making it? How do you sort of reel that back in to control that a little bit?
Yeah, I think for me, you just have to explain that rest is where we start to get the adaptations, and if you're constantly training in a fatigue state, then you're not going to improve on any of the metrics. So I think it's explaining the benefits of rest and recovery to players, and thinking, yeah, it's great that you're loving it, it's great that you invested in it, but end of the day, we need to get you right for the game coming up on a
Mm,
Tuesday or a Saturday. Skills pay the bills, so make sure that they're ready for that as well.
100%. What's the take that you do for any type of injuries around ACLs and ankle sprains?
Yeah, so obviously we'll do screening a lot, and I think a big part of our program, a big part of ACL mitigation is access to large amounts of deceleration training, change direction training, and general good solid strength and conditioning stuff. And we, like I said, on the intensive days where we'll do isolated change of direction sessions where we'll focus on deceleration technique and making sure that the lads get into good positions when they change direction. Obviously, one of the big factors of ACL injuries is how you change direction, and certain
Mm,
things within a change of direction task can, if you do them wrong or incorrectly, that they're going to put you at greater risk. So I think that's a big part of our program is making sure that they're technically proficient in deceleration and changing direction, and making sure that they've got the right sort of lateral hip strength, and making sure their trunk strength's strong, so there's no spilling over to one side when they execute their plant step. So yeah, I think for me that's from a performance side of view, that's where we have the biggest influence in terms of mitigating ACL injuries and mitigating ACL risk. And then obviously the physios will do their bits in terms of screening, making sure lateral hip strength is good, making sure range of motion is good, making sure ankle range is good, because we obviously know that decreased ankle range of motion is going to contribute to sort of increased knee loading. So yeah, those are the sort of the processes and things that we have in place to try and mitigate that risk. And we try and we have an indoor astro and we have an outdoor astro, and we'll try as best to make sure that we're training on grass, because we have seen in the past a lot of ankle ATFL and a few ACLs
mm.
come from indoor astro facilities. So that's one thing that we try and push the coaches towards. Sometimes it's not always there to have for us. So
Yeah. Based on that, what are some of your like low hanging fruit in terms of exercises that you implement in these deceleration or drills for deceleration?
Yeah, so like I mentioned briefly earlier, on our intensive day, uh, we'll do a pre-training session based on that theme. So the exercises that we're incorporating at the minute are sort of some lateral-based plyometric work, some lateral hip strength, so isometric work, so like lateral bunkies, side planks with hip abductions, so really targeting that, and then sort of landmine curtsy lunges, um,
Mm,
stuff where you're targeting that lateral hip a little bit more, and then actual change of direction isometric. So we'll get in the bands, in the big green bands, tight to the rack, get some tension on it, and really try and get into that leaned position, pushing against the band so that they can feel the correct position in terms of their trunk and where their foot needs to be underneath the center of mass. And then some sort of band overloaded decel hops where the band's pulling them in. They're having to work hard to stabilize, sit into their hip, not fall too far forward, be strong with the trunk. So yeah, that's the type of pre-training sessions that we'll do.
I found it interesting that you mentioned that sometimes you have to explain that maybe grass is the best option.
Mm,
When I was at university, we did a little study on it was an assessment, but like we had to look into ACL injuries and what different factors is to it. And the way that astro pitches works are like hooks onto the studs or the
yeah.
oldies, and it actually catches them so that they get into this twisted position.
Hmm.
Is that something that you are very wary of when you are sort of changing different grounds?
Yeah, massively. We're all aware of it. The coaches are aware of it as well, and they know the risks of it. And um, we have had incidences where studs get caught and body wants to move one way, but the foot stayed there, and they've gone over on it. And players that sustain those type of injuries are then psychologically come back and are a bit wary
Mm,
of training back on those sort of surfaces. So that's something that we have to be aware of, and we have to innovate a little bit. If a player's coming back from a certain injury and the only option is Astro, then we'll have to innovate, and they might not be part of the session, and it might be an isolated session on their own somewhere. Um, so yeah, we are wary of it, and we try and mitigate it as much as possible.
yeah, from things that we've spoke about, it seems that there's a certain degree of trust that you put on the players to, and it goes the other way around. Like they from the different considerations that you've put forward, it seems like they trust the sort of process in the way that it can be tailored for them. What
Hmm.
has led and developed you and the whole team to think this way?
It's a good
I know that's
question.
a bit of a lot.
Yeah, it's yeah. I think from a team point of view, we've all got our specific roles, and I think that's the benefit of this department is we're sort of generalist specialists, so we're all have our little niche and our little area that we work on with the players, and each person is given uh, full exposure to bring those skills out in the players, and I think just having a guy that's related to strength and power, speaks volumes. So the department know and the coaches know that that is an area of particular importance, and as well as a speed and movement guy, and as well as a return to play guy, these are all really important roles, and the club puts trust in us to deliver the best program. And yeah, I think with the trust in the players and the game, the, the aim of the game as a strength and conditioning coach is to gain trust from your players, and that's our job. Um,
Of them, yeah.
they need to trust in us, and then we need to trust in them. And once you get that little spark and a little, I feel really good after that primer, or oh, this training's really working, my counter movement jump's gone up, or those are little things that you got that trust straight away with that player. You got that buy-in, and they're yours then. So that's sort of where we're at, and that's where we see the value.
Yeah. With a culture like that, how have you seen like the then work rate increase from the athletes from that?
Yeah, massively. It's we lean to the coaches a lot on that side of things. The coaches will pick up things normally that we don't, and they'll come up. Sometimes we come up with ideas better than we can. So we lean on the coaches for that, a lot of that. And after training or after games, they'll come in and debrief. They'll be like, "Oh, he was really good today. He looked really powerful, really strong, really quick." And coaches see that probably better than what we do. And yeah, like I said, we rely on them a lot, and a combination of us looking for certain things and the coaches looking for certain things, and it seems to work. And it definitely has. I'll try and pick out. This is another sort of area for buy-in for players, is that I'll look at all the games and training are recorded. So if I see a particular part of a training session where a player uses his strength or uses his speed or decelerates really well and changes direction really well, I'll clip that and then I'll show it to the player. So if it's a coming together with a shoulder to shoulder and he comes off best and wins the ball and starts an attack, then I'll show that to the player and be like, right, that's because there's this extra little bit of upper body work that we needed to do, or that might be because we needed to do this extra little bit of trunk work, or whatever it may be. And I remember a scenario where a player, it was last year, I didn't even see the goal because I was blinded by the linesman or whatever, so I didn't really see. And he's a striker, pinned the defender, spun him, got to the byline, cut one back, and we scored a goal from it. And he came up to me the day after and I was like, that goal that I scored was all down to, that extra gym work that we've been putting in on the morning. So that's where we get the buy-in, and that's where, that's what makes you get up in the morning and come to your job. And
Yeah, 100%. I think that transferable sort of imagery would call it. Like, I think that's really important for getting athletes into this zone where they're like, yeah, actually, I should probably get my ass in the gym
mm,
because that's actually helping my performance more than just playing my sport. I know for a lot of sports, like sprinting specifically,
mm,
you only get faster by sprinting.
yeah,
With a football, because there's different elements to it where you're sort of having to spin, you're having to speed up, you're having to slow down.
mm,
There's contact. There's more contact than people would imagine,
yeah,
and that
massively.
contact with them, having that transferable imagery where they're like, actually, the work that I'm doing there is happening because I've seen it happen. Do you
Mm,
think that's helped shape this perception that some athletes have had in football, where it went from that slow, I don't want to lift because I'm slow, I'm this, I'm that, to now
mm.
athletes come up to you as like, actually, I want to spend more time in there.
Yeah, no, we have it a lot and we see it a lot, and players have come up to me and asked to do extra work because they've seen what the benefits of the other players have, and um, they see the relevance of it. They see the relevance of being physically strong and capable because they know where the game is at. They see it. They go and watch Premier League football. They'll see it on the telly. They'll see how big these guys are actually at. And that's when they'll come and ask, and they know that the schedule is demanding and the game is demanding, so they need to be robust enough to cope with those demands. And yeah, it is. We have had a lot of that, and that's credit to our department and the way we work, um, and credit to the club as well and the academy setup for giving us that contact time, because we do get a lot of contact time with our players, and that's uh, one of the reasons that we see all these benefits, because we do spend a lot of time with them, and we're expected to make improvements on them. So
Yeah, with that coach communication and department communication, how important have you found that to benefit the athletes in the longer term?
yeah, I think it's key that you all MDT stakeholders are in a room together and on the same page about a particular athlete and where they need to focus their energy on. If is it a physical deficiency that they have, or is it technical? Is it psychological that they need more help with? We'll always have these kind of reviews and sit downs regarding players and what is best for them in the long run. And I think it's important that you have those regular updates and chats with people, because it's, as we know, football's a ruthless industry, and the chances of them making it is slim, as they know that, and we're trying to make that gap bigger. We're trying to make everyone successful in what they might do or what level that might be. So it's our duty of care to make sure they are the best versions of themselves.
Yeah. Well, in terms of sort of having that coach to athlete buy-in and the different communication programs behind it, how has that sort of built up the program in the way that user obviously you have won that season or that league a couple times now. How has that sort of helped bring in more athletes and buy-in from the new athletes?
Yeah, I think the younger athletes see the sort of the success that we've had at the 21s level at the minute, and they'll want to be a part of that. And it's always, when they get involved in a match day squad, and you can see that they're excited about that, and that's what we want to see. That's what we want. We want guys wanting to play for us, and yeah, it's definitely developed due to the success on the pitch. And again, that's another reason that for the buy-in for the players is seeing the success on the pitch. And uh, it does help when you're winning a lot and everyone pats each other on the back and it's all nicey. And you're the reason that they've won loads of titles. No, it's not like that. But yeah, it's all a contributing factor, and everyone has their input, and that's why we've been a little bit successful over the last couple of years at 21s level.
Yeah, I've always been very interested in this development model of certain teams. So like you've got from you were mentioning under nines to obviously professional athletes. With having different age groups, how have you found like these role models and like the athletes obviously coming into the facility and seeing these guys roaming about? How
Mhm.
have you seen like that role model mentality play within throughout the whole club?
Yeah, it does, and I'll always mention it to players that especially the older ones. If there's younger players within that session, or if it's a gym session or if it's a training session, I will always lean towards the older, more senior players in that group and make sure that they lead by example, because that's where the culture starts. You want players coming up and driving culture and driving standards, and from a professional point of view, and from an off the pitch point of view and on the pitch point of view. So yeah, I'll always try and lean towards those players, and those players that have tendencies to not be switched on and not be engaged. Then I will also sort of mention that to them. We have younger lads in the session. They look up to you. They want to be where you're at. Um, they're also potentially coming for your shirt. So make sure that you're uh, lead by example, do everything right. Which is it's not for me. It's not a hard thing to do, really.
I like the thing with the whole role model is that obviously there's so many great role models within football, and it's having
Mhm.
that stage where within your club you can also make a big impact on younger athletes. Who has been one of the athletes that you sort of rely on to be that role model for everyone else?
Yeah, there's a few definitely that I really enjoy working with, and you know they've had they've been involved in first team squads, and you know again that's another thing that the younger lads look up to. They'll if it's a I don't know an under 16 in an under 21 session, then there'll be under 21s in that session that have been involved in the first team. So they're effectively training with someone who's been involved in Premier League football. So for them, it's massive. And there's been, like I said, like I touched on briefly just then, there's been players that you want to have successful careers just because of how diligent they are, how professional they are, and they commit everything. They trust you, and they just give everything 100%.
No, like football's always a very interesting area for me because like there's obviously a lot of money that goes into football and the
Mm.
program development, everything else. And some athletes are obviously in it for the intrinsic where it's they're doing it for themselves or a specific purpose. But then the extrinsic one where athletes are doing it for the money and sort of the fame and everything
Mm.
that comes to it. How do you try and reel your athletes in and guide them to a positive way of dealing with some of the success that can come from football?
Yeah, I think it's probably doesn't fall into my remit as such. But you do hear conversations that players have, and you do need to make sure that if they have been involved in a first team session or been involved in a squad on match day, that when they come back to under 21 environment, that they're still as motivated and
Mm.
as engaged in the session. And yeah, pointing out the there's it's hard pointing out the harsh realities of football to them, and they'll know that as well. But making sure that it's potentially not a long career, and making sure that they have no regrets once they leave their career. And you obviously hope every player that you work with goes on as long, successful careers in football, and it's not always the case. But making sure that they do everything that they can, and making sure that we do everything we can as a coaching staff to giving them the best opportunity for a long career.
What would be some advice that you would give new strength and conditioning coaches, like wanting to take these high opportunity roles?
I think it's obviously a real tough industry, I believe, at the minute. I think there's not many roles out there, and it is a tough environment to work in. But I think getting experience coaching, no matter what level, I think if you do get the chance to get an interview and you do get the chance to showcase your skills in a practical based interview, then the interviewer wants to know that you can coach and that you can deal with a large group of players. So get the experience coaching, whatever level it is. Email amateur clubs,
Mhm.
email universities, email schools. No, all schools will have pretty much an S&C coach, but comprehensive schools or state schools, get the word out there. Try and get some coaching experience. Deal with large groups, because you'll deal with different dynamics when you come into a sporting role. So get some coaching experience, network, chat to the people. If there's an area of weakness that you feel like you need to work on, speak to the person who's an expert in that area and get more info on it, and research who the best guys are. So if it's ACL, or you're looking at knee injuries and you're trying to clue up on that, you're looking at Ender King and guys like that. And then strength and power, you're looking at Dan Baker and all his research, and Tim Sushamel, and just, yeah, if that's an area of weakness, then look into it.
Is that similar to what you did while you were sort of going through your journey?
Yeah, and I think it's probably one of the regrets. I probably didn't do it enough, and I was lucky that I had coaching experience alongside my masters, and that helped me a lot. And I was exposed to in a professional environment as an intern, so that did help. And I did little bits of cricket coaching as well, where I'd handled groups and coach. I loved coaching, no matter if it was cricket, strength and conditioning, football. I just coached, so I loved it, and I got myself out there to coach, and that did definitely help. And yeah, and then in terms of where I thought my weaknesses are, I'll always try to, the best I can, try and read up on it and see who the best people are in that area. And there's always an expert in a certain area.
What are some of the mistakes that you identified really early on, and what did you do to fix them?
Some of the mistakes, tough one. So I think again, some of the mistakes, probably a mistake I'm probably making currently is thinking that just because you've worked a certain amount of years as a role in a strength and conditioning coach, that you're guaranteed a big role or a head of
Mm,
performance role. Or I think for me, I think, yeah, I have to, especially with the way the industry is, and there's not many roles out there, that you have to not just wait for things to happen and try and make things happen yourself. And whether that's putting more social media content out there, whether that's growing your network and speaking to other people and such things like that. I think that's probably the mistake I'm probably making currently, is probably not doing that enough, and probably thinking that, after a certain amount of time, I'll just land on a role that's, a head of performance at a big club or a big team
mm.
or a big thing. I think it's important to make sure that I'm trying to make things happen now. I'm still relatively early on in my career, so yeah, I think that's probably it at the minute.
Yeah, I will give you your flowers though. I think that you're very intuitive, the way that you're sort of constantly researching everything that you're doing and looking
Hmm.
at different ways to improve your athletes. I know you say you could do more, and perhaps that's how you feel, and that's obviously fine.
Hmm.
But you are, I mean, you've won 3 seasons with under 21s. You're, I think you're doing pretty well. If I'm able to give you that flower.
No, it's been okay, and like I said, I still feel I'm very early on in my career, and I'm still definitely learning a lot. And I think you should be a lifelong learner as a strength and conditioning coach. So yeah, I'm still a bit of a sponge, and I'm still taking things on, and
Mhm.
yeah, I'm loving developing as a coach, and as a person.
Yeah, like I've spoke to different coaches, and we sort of have the same thought processes. Like we can always do better. Like Ron McKeefer is one of my biggest mentors, and I constantly pick his brain on things that he's sort of up to and learning. And he even says himself, like he falls asleep watching YouTube videos on how to better himself coaching, and he's been in this industry
Yeah,
a lot longer than I've been alive. So like it's one of those that as soon as you think you know everything and your learning stops,
yeah,
that's when there's a big downfall.
yeah, massively. There's always new methods, new people bringing brilliant research out, and new ways of training, and you have to keep up with that, and you have to experiment with it. You have to critique it. You have to see whether that would fit your environment.
Mm,
So you always have to constantly learning, and like I said, there'll always be an area that's not a strength of yours. And for me, it's probably around the return to play and the from both from a pitch and from a gym point of view, the return to play, working with sort of injured players. That's an area for me that
mm,
I want to work on personally, and yeah, and me understanding that and trying to get better at that is going to make me better, hopefully, as a practitioner and develop me even further.
100%. I've got an interesting episode coming up. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be the week after. But she's a physiotherapist for the UFC Performance Institute,
Mm.
and she does a lot with concussion protocols and how she gets her athletes back into the cage and into training. Like that area is so fascinating. That the whole return to play from different types of injuries as well, not only
Yeah,
as a physiotherapist but as a strength and conditioning coach. Because like that fine line between when the physio takes them and when we take them, like
yeah.
that line can be very very tricky to see, sort of go on who does it fall on.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it is a tricky one, and for me, I think it's important to even understand the early stages where the physio is predominantly leading it, and understand what's the criteria for them progressing on, and what are the benchmarks, and how do we get certain things better if it's not, and yeah, that is an area that I think we sort of strength and conditioning coach probably don't take into account as much, the sort of the early stages. And I think if you're involved in that process early on, when you're probably going to take the athlete, and where you need to take them forward to.
100%. 100%. Thank you so much for coming on and sort of going through your program and how you lead, how you sort of help these athletes gather that buy-in and how to effectively progress their athletic career. Is there anything that you want to sort of plug and sort of get people to follow you on so they can keep up with how you develop these programs?
Yeah, so yeah, first off, thanks for having me on. It's the first time I've done podcasts, so apologies if there's listeners out there that can't understand my Yorkshire accent and my stuttering sometimes. But no, I'm not a massive social media guy in terms of content, but I am on social media. But again, it's another aspect that I want to improve on, and get out there a little bit more, is what I'm doing with my athletes. And probably the best place to find me on is either LinkedIn or Twitter X. So yeah, that's me, Archie Ogden there, and I think my Twitter's Archie Ogden 94. So yeah, I'm on there. If anyone wants to reach out, anyone wants to chat, I'm more than
No,
more than
perfect.
more than happy to.
No, I was able to understand you the whole time, so I think
That's great.
you're pretty good. Some of the American listeners might struggle, but
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
I
what
think they
it
might
is.
be.
Nah, that's all good. Thank you for coming on, and we'll speak soon.
Perfect. Appreciate it, man. Thank you.